Hi, everybody. Thank you for listening to this podcast. This podcast is with Greg Judy. We actually went down and visited Greg's farm. We're hoping to have a YouTube video that goes along with this podcast at some point here in the near future. Greg's farm was pretty awesome to go and see. Greg is one of the main people that I took direction from, and as a person that was lost in the first year or two of grazing, Greg's YouTube videos were one of the most important resources for me to follow. It's pretty unique that someone can push out that much content, and then the fact that it's within a relative time of right now. So he talks about what they're going through in the moment. And I had the first year I was grazing, I had turned out our cattle into some pretty lush legume pastures, and luckily I watched the video within a couple hours of turning them out into that, and Greg was talking about making sure not to put cattle into hard, heavy legume stands of red clover and white clover without tracing or without bringing along some other dry forage for them to self-medicate. So I think he's probably a big reason why I didn't lose any cattle during that stretch. I ended up following them with some dry hay, and then they handled it fine. But it's things like that, or right now we're dealing with a lot of fly control and fly issues, and if you follow Greg's page, I'm sure they're talking about how they're combating flies and just the different types of grazing techniques they're using. A little update on our farm: we are getting through the second rotation on my place, and we are going to head from there to another farm where the cattle have not grazed it at all. So what we're grazing right now is a lot of older, stemmy, mature type grass. But what I am seeing as well, and a lot of people will say you don't want to graze that. Obviously, keep an eye on their condition. So we're keeping an eye, making sure they're not getting too skinny or losing any condition on the forage. But there is so much clover, or at least what I'm seeing is a lot of red clover, white clover, and alfalfa that is underneath the older, mature forage, along with the next round of grass that's growing. So I think what we have accomplished there is we're tightening them up a lot, so they knock down a lot of that old stemmy stuff. And Greg and I talk about it quite a bit in this podcast, where you can build a lot of organic matter, plus also take advantage of all those seed heads that get laid down on the ground. So I think a lot of folks talk about not grazing that more mature material, but we are having pretty good luck with it, since we are pretty understocked this year for how much rain that we've gotten, coming off of a year that we had heavy drought. So just something that we're looking into right now. Our fly control is probably the best that it's ever been this time of the year, and I equate a lot of that to the mineral feeder that we follow around with them. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it over to Greg's episode. I apologize if there's any audio issues, since we did record it outside, and I know there's a lot of birds in the background. But Greg Judy is one of the best. He puts things in the most simplistic terms for people that are just beginning to learn how to graze, and people who are that are getting into higher level and more in-depth advanced grazing. So enjoy this episode with Greg Judy. Thank you for listening. Please attend our conference in Madison this December, and we'll be able to keep putting out a lot more content just like this. Thanks, everybody, and have a great rest of your summer. From Acres USA, you are listening to the Acres USA podcast, a conversational podcast where we'll explore sustainable farming, regenerative practices, and the latest innovations in eco-agriculture with some of your favorite farmers and ranchers. I'm your host, Taylor Henry, the owner and CEO of Acres USA. Welcome to the Acres USA podcast. So that's actually first thing I would, if we go in depth with how you manage and create these ponds. This is something that's super interesting to me, because I would love to be able to just cast a line out and catch some fish, and then how you've managed them and what the process is, what that looks like.
Yeah, so over the years, just on the various farms that we've had, I've built 42 ponds now. And when I build a pond, I've got a dozer operator that I use exclusively. And I tell him, I said, I've got to have a minimum of 8 feet of water. I like to have, 12 to 15 feet is even better. And I want my ponds to be deep on the sides. So a lot of people will find a draw and put a dam in there and push water back a long distance. And the more surface area of the pond that is shallow on that acre, or whatever you've got, 2 acres, the shallower the water is, it heats up. And in a drought, when it heats up like that, you lose a lot of water. So I have the ponds dug deep on the sides so that the water stays cooler that way. And then as soon as the ponds are built and they start filling, we drag cedar trees. So this pond's got 20 cedars in it that are 30 feet long. And they're all anchored around the edge. So you got to realize especially when you're a fisherman, I'm a fisherman, I love to fish, most of your fish are going to be in the very high oxygen areas. They're not going to be down on the bottom of your pond. If you got that pond's 25 foot deep. I've never caught a fish out in the middle of that pond. They're always on the edges. Yeah. So that's where we put our cover at.
But they can get to that deep parts in the winter.
They can get to the deep part in the winter, yeah.
And what's your frost depth usually?
Well, here it's 32 inches.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
You can just trench water line in.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, our trench, most of our water lines, we've run 8,000 feet on Judy Farm here. That water line is 22 inches deep.
Wow.
Because, see, once you get sod grown over the top of that trench, you're good to go.
Well, that's kind of one thing I've thought about is could we get away with, one of those trenchers that you get and it only goes 36 to 42 inches and, we just have to shut it off in the winter for a while, but still at least it'd be underground and keep the water cool. And
yeah.
But yeah, whenever we've dug water line, it sucks because we go at least 6 feet is the bare minimum.
Oh.
Now, granted, this year I don't think we had frost more than a foot in the ground.
Yeah.
Just because of the winter we had. And
yeah.
We got such good timing with deep snow when it got cold, and we came out of the back end of winter with barely any frost.
Yeah. Well, I was born and raised on a dairy farm up in northern Minnesota, pretty close to Duluth, and we had to bury water lines up there 8 foot deep.
Yeah.
And if you didn't, they froze.
How do you explain Duluth's climate?
Well, I can tell you how my mom described it. She couldn't take it.
Yeah.
I was number 6, the fifth. And then I had 2 more after. She had 2 more after that, and she told my dad, said, "We're out of here. I can't take these winters." And that was back when they had real winters in Minnesota. I mean, there'd be 5, 6, 7 foot of snow. Yeah. And us little kids, heck, you couldn't even go outside. They'd lose you in the snow.
And you were dairy farming up there?
Yep. My dad bought a dairy farm up there by Duluth, and we were there, I think, about 6 years, something like that. So
6 years, what, you guys raising crops?
Yeah, Dad, he raised alfalfa. He raised a little bit of corn for his silage. It was all fed to the dairy cows. Yeah.
So how would you describe his practices? And I'm always curious on how people...
Dad was from Illinois, so he was a row cropper. He believed in tilling the soil. You had to plow it every spring, and he did the same out here. And it didn't work out so well here because this soil, if you plow it, you lose it. And so he had to go get a job in town after he found out that you can't plow rucker. We got clay here, and you plow it, it just leaves. You lost your topsoil and you're done. Cover it up with grass and put livestock on it, you can make a good living on it.
Yeah, we have a heavy clay base as well, and I was shocked. I think that's what saved us last year in the drought. It just held that little bit of moisture that was there. And
yep.
So what? I don't understand how that happens. Illinois crop farmer goes to Duluth to be a dairy farmer.
So here's what happened. Mom and Dad got married. Dad didn't marry till he was 29. Land in Illinois at that time they thought was crazy high, which, you know, they got married in 1942. So they moved to Rucker here, just right up here. And they lived here about 5 or 7 years, and Dad was a wanderer. And so he got a chance to go back to Illinois and farm my grandfather's farm. That didn't work out. Him and my grandfather didn't get along. He just wasn't that good of a farmer compared to my grandpa. And so they went to Minnesota. That's where the land was. He bought that farm for $40 an acre.
Wow.
$40. Now, the reason it was $40, it was in northern Minnesota.
Yeah.
And very, very sandy.
Yeah.
It was very sandy, and so when the water came down, it was gone. And sandy soil is one of the toughest to build organic matter in because it just grinds it up, you know. So you got to put a lot of carbon down on sand to get it to where it'll hold some water.
You probably weren't thinking that way back then either.
Oh no, Dad was not you know, he was a set stock guy. He just gave the cows a pasture, and he didn't rotate.
Yeah.
You know, so. A lot of people didn't rotate, and heck, there's people today that aren't rotating. I mean, I don't know why. It's, you know, that's a huge advantage is to let your grass rest, graze it correctly, don't take it down to the dirt, and get the animals off of it and let it regrow.
Yeah. Especially now when they see, you know, when they kick them out into these big pastures and everything's already seeded out right now too. You think about what those cows must go through, where they probably have some pretty good feed for a few days, maybe a week or two.
Yeah.
But then, man, when it starts getting down to what's left, like what are they really putting in their body?
Yeah, stems.
Yeah.
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 So what would you say was a turning point for you? Like, when did you start being like, well, I wonder if this is the best way to do these?
You know, I'll be honest with you, Taylor. I started out very conventional. I was raised on a farm my whole life. I milked a cow my whole life. We kept cows, and I milked them for the family. We sold the dairy cows and we moved to Missouri. We brought 12 with us. We milked them right up there where we just came from. Had a little parlor there.
Oh, where you had your handling facility?
Yep.
Gotcha.
No, it's across the road. There's a little dairy barn. We made it into a little dairy. And, you know, milk prices went to heck, and Dad sold the cows. So I started out very conventional. I went and got a loan. I bought the land. I got the equipment, got a loan for the cows, and I'm telling you what, I had a job in town. It's a good thing I did. I would have lost everything. And at the end of the year, I went and paid my note off, my production loan, and the banker says, well, Greg, we had a good year. I'm like, we did? Well, he said, you made your payments, and let's do it again next year. And I'm like, no, I said, you had a good year. I didn't. I said, I don't have any money left. And so I loved the grazing part. I loved the cattle, but I couldn't figure out how to make a living at it. And so I read an article, and that article was your sole purpose in life should be to control the land, not own it. And what he was talking about was leasing land. And it was it was what I needed. It was a kick in the tail. I'd been raised in this area my whole life. There was idle parcels of land around us. Nobody was doing anything with. Didn't have any fence on it. Didn't have any water. I knew how to build fence, you know, high tensile. Mm-hmm. And so I went to Jim Garish's grazing school. That was in 1993. And so I learned rotational grazing. I'm like, man, this is great. Just, you know, moving animals. And I really got into it. And then I met Ian Mitchell-Innes, the mob grazer, holistic manager from Africa, and that was in 2006. And then I started doing more of the high density rotation. Some people call it mob, some people call it AMP, adaptive multipaddock grazing, depending on who you talk to. But basically what we're doing is we've got the animals tighter and we're moving them more frequently. And we've increased our numbers because of leased land, so that's what it's allowed us to do. We didn't go into debt. I never used a bank. Jan and I started custom grazing like you're doing. So in 1996, I got divorced. It was terrible. It was awful. 6 years it took me to get to that divorce. And so I lost everything except for this farm. I was able to keep the farm. and the debt on the farm. And I'm like, how am I going to get out of this hole? I mean, it was bad.
Yeah.
And we started custom grazing. And I met Jan, and she started helping me, and we started putting these little old farms together around here. Next thing you know, the sale barn owner, that's who we got in with. He said, Greg, what do you got out here? I said, well, we're looking for some cows to graze. So he started bringing us cattle and steers. Whatever we wanted, he'd bring them to us. And so we were getting paid so much a month per cow. And so we built up this nice nest egg, and that's when we bought our first cow-calf pairs, the South Pole. That was in 2002. And we just kept building from that. And then I quit my off-farm job in 2009. My goal was to be a full-time grazer by age 50. And that's what I did.
Just before 50, or how old were you?
I was 50.
Nice.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, then I'm not too far behind, because that'd be my goal too.
Adam, I'm serious. You've got to get started young. Don't put it off, because once you get up in your 60s, you don't have the energy you do in your 40s. How old are you?
30.
Oh gosh. Yeah, you're a young whippersnapper. So yeah, there's no excuses for you.
I'm not making it. Well,
No,
I'm a little
just,
busy.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, it's good to get started. But I tell you what I did. I wrote down my goals, what I wanted to do. I wrote down how much income I needed to kiss my job goodbye in town, and I started focusing on running that many animals. So when I could live just off the farm income, that's what I did that last year. I made sure my income off the farm could support me. I quit my job. And I didn't have any debt, no debt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My dream is, I'll say is 100 mama cows with 100 acres paid for, and probably won't see me anymore in public.
Yeah.
But you have way more than that now. So you climbed out of, obviously the 80s seemed to be hard on everybody. So part of that was the interest rates and.
Yep.
Yeah,
it was bad. It was really bad.
So what was the most custom grazed animals that you had? Like what was?
So in our peak, we ran 1,500 stalkers in 1 year. Now they were being brought to us 300 to 400 at a time.
Okay.
And we get them in as 400 pounds. We graze them till they were 6, and he wanted to sell them. He didn't want them to go over 600 pounds.
Yeah.
If you go over 600 pounds, there's a big dock right there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I've tried diving into. Well, last year I played around with the sales barn, and boy, they have an eye.
Yep.
That I don't have.
Yeah.
So I bought a group of nice black 400, 500 pounders.
Yep.
And in our area, we have everything is crossed with Holsteins in them.
Yep.
Well, as they kept growing out through the summer, the longer those legs got, and I'm like, oh, I knew I did it. I sent them back to the sales barn last year and took a beating on them. And I had a couple Brahmas, which I'm still so mad about getting rid of, because they did great on the grass, but they absolutely were. I think that one sold for 70 cents a pound or something. It has a 800-pound steer, and it's like, can I go back and I'll buy it back right now?
Yeah. You could have ground it up in hamburger.
Oh, I know. And not even, I mean, just, and honestly, they performed well, and they did well, and they stayed fat, and,
Well, you bring up a good point, Taylor, and people are always asking me, and I'm not picking on breeds, but I'm just telling you straight up. These miniature breeds, they're great. They're really good for small homesteads. I love Dexter cattle for small homesteads.
Yeah.
They don't eat a lot. But I get this all the time. Oh, I'm getting started, and I'm going to get me some Dexters, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. I said, be careful. Just make sure you can direct market all that meat. Because if you take a Dexter to the sale barn, it's like bringing that dog to the sale barn.
Yeah.
You're going to get 40 cents a pound. Everybody else is getting $3.50 a pound.
Yeah.
They'll steal them from you. They literally do. They just steal them, and you will go broke.
Well, and it's very interesting when you're in. I mean, I think it's a good experience for anyone to go to, because I mean this is the one thing about cattle. Pigs, chickens, they can't do that. But I can go liquidate what I have in the field 4 days a week within 30 miles of our house, and there's no other animal that you can do that with, really.
Right.
Not in our area, at least.
Right.
So it'd be silly not to at least understand what's happening there.
Yeah.
But those guys are a lot smarter than they lead on, and they know a sucker coming from a long ways away, and I was that sucker. But I learned from it, and you know, I didn't die from it or anything, but you know, lost a little bit of money, and it was the first time losing a little bit of money with cattle.
Yeah.
You know, you get hit with a drought and that all in the same year, but you know, I get a lot of inspiration by everything that you say. It makes a lot of sense. If you will speak in layman terms, where I think a lot of times, especially in the industry now that we're in with acres, you know, there's a lot of complex things, and there's no question that there's complex things going on with the soil and
Yep.
everything, but you make it seem pretty dang simple, like anyone can do it as long as they put effort into it. And really, with the contract grazing and going to lease land, anyone, that's open for anyone. There is really not that much startup cost there.
No, that's why I wrote the book.
Yeah.
You know, no risk ranching, custom grazing on leased land. I mean, we were basically a management service starting out. We didn't own the land, we didn't own the cattle. The cattle owners bought the hay for us. We unrolled their hay to their cattle on other people's leased farms that were bankrupt, soil bankrupt. We couldn't grow them at broom sedge. Go look on our farms today, there's no broom sedge out there, but it was paid for by other people's money, and they paid us to unroll that hay for them to their cattle because they didn't want to mess with it in the wintertime. So we had dry cows, that was our specialty. We'd get a dry bred cow, come onto our farm. We'd graze that cow through the summertime. And so these would be cows that were calving in the fall. They'd come and get that cow before she calved, and they would bring back the other cows, the ones that they'd just taken calves off of that were going to be calving in the spring. And so we always had trailers full going both directions. They never came out with an empty trailer. They had cattle in it, they dumped those out, and they loaded cattle and took them back. And so that's really, you go hauling, your hauling cost. People don't understand that. This hauling cost thing is big. It costs a lot of money to haul cattle, you know. And so if you can have that trailer full both directions and not have an empty back haul.
Was that one of the, so did you buy a truck and trailer?
No, that's the beautiful thing. I didn't own the animals.
Yeah.
They did.
So they were hauling too.
They paid all the trucking.
Yeah.
I bought a dart gun. I had a cat, I still got it. Pretty good with it. I don't have to use it anymore because my cattle don't get sick. But when you're dealing with cell barn cattle, you better learn how to doctor animals because they will die on you. We were getting calves that had been vaccinated, dehorned, castrated, commingled with who knows how many other people's cattle, been in a cell barn and rustled around hot-shotted and probably hadn't drank or ate anything for 24 hours. That's what we were getting.
Yeah.
Very high stress. And so we got good at taking stress off of the animals. Because if you didn't, you'd lose 5%. Now, if I went over 3%, that was on me. That, you know, the grazer had to suck that up. We got a weigh ticket going in and we got a weigh ticket going out. And as I developed that grazing business, I finally started charging by the head.
So that's interesting to me because my initial gut reaction was to charge by weight gain. And the guy that I ended up working with didn't want to do it. He wanted to charge by per day per head.
That's the way to do it. You know why?
I was arguing.
No, he was protecting you. You will get something. You'll get paid. Here's what happened to me. I brought a load of cattle. They brought 300 heifers out, 300 of them. And as soon as they dropped down the semis, we had 6 pots. Then 50 on a pot. And there's 3 pots. Anyway, there's 300 of them. And those things started pooping. And there was kernels of whole corn coming out. I'm like, oh no. And they were fat.
Yeah.
They were fat. You know, those heifers grazed out there all summer long. You know what they gained?
Probably not much.
0.3. 0.3 pounds a day. So there they ate my grass all summer long. I had to move them. I was moving them twice a day, morning and night. I made nothing. Don't do that. What he needed, it was another grazer owner, another cattle owner. He needed a place to park those heifers. And there's old Greg. So.
Because it's the same thing that this guy has. I mean, he just has way too many. He has so many cattle for and not enough grass, and even though they're in the thousands.
Yeah.
But what is this? In their head, they just keep holding, and the longer they can hold an animal, the better.
They're trying to hit a market, and usually if you can hit that July, back in the day, it's like the 3rd week of July, there was always a nice bump in cattle price, and that's what they were trying to hit.
I've heard guys in our area talk about September for some reason.
Well, September is the worst. October, September is the worst because that's when everybody's weaning their calves, and you have a whole flux of calves coming in. It's just oversupply, so your price goes down. Every week that you get closer to spring green up, the calf price goes up because you're closer to green grass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would you say, or I guess what is, so you get paid per animal per day. What else went into those agreements?
Well, first of all,
who paid for the mineral and salt?
They paid for all the mineral and the salt. I paid for, of course, the management. I was there to doctor the calves. They paid for the medicine. They paid for the hay. I supplied the labor and the land.
Yeah.
And helped them load them. I guaranteed when they came to load cattle, they loaded cattle. We weren't chasing cattle. You got to guarantee a man when he brings animals out there, how am I going to get these off your farm? If there's no handling facilities, how are you going to get them up and load them? You can't just go out there and drive a few steel posts and put some cattle panels on it. You got to have something that'll hold them. And so what I did is there's a guy not too far from here that has a portable corral. And in those days, I could rent it for $75 a day. I did. I went and got it. And it was 2 1/4 steel panels all hooked to this. It even had a hydraulic lift on it where you could lift up. It had a chute on it.
Yeah.
And let me tell you what, it would hold a pot load. It'd hold 50 cows.
Oh.
And boy, you breathe easy when you put them in there because you know you're going to get them loaded. Yeah.
I think my generation might struggle with that. I struggled with it, but realizing that half of this battle is making the connections with the local people.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, I'd rather not talk to or ask anybody, but I had enough issues loading cattle. Even though I was watching your videos, I still tried cheaping out and having some cattle panels, and it was an expensive day after that last bad loading session I had. I was like, nope, we're going to go get actual handling facilities.
Yeah. Yeah, when you go to load them, they need to be sold. When the owner wants to sell them that day, you better be able to sell them. And if you can't get them loaded, you won't get another set of cattle from him.
Yeah.
You just won't, because...
Well, that's part of the moving thing, too. I think the moving and getting them to where they're following you and trailing you, I still don't really understand how, when your stock's at grazing and you kick them out and then you come back to get them 4 or 5 months later, I mean, they have to be pretty wild.
Horses.
Yeah.
Horses.
And you can't even just use a wire to guide them into places either.
No, they don't respect wire at all. They just run right through it.
No, it's a pretty amazing. I mean, that's why. Well, I know you agree, but I think they're the perfect animal for us. They, for some reason, respect that one white wire.
Yep.
It doesn't make that much sense.
Well,
but it's psychology.
We actually had a lead steer, so I was grazing all these steers, and this one steer came up to me first day, a little old Brahma steer. He's a Brahma cross, had big old ears on him, and he came right up to me. And I'd take a little alfalfa pellet, shake in a bucket, and I'd try and teach the calves to follow me. Well, that steer came up and stuck his head in the bucket. And I started petting on him, and he just sat there. I'm like, this has got to be a bucket calf. But he didn't look like a bucket calf, because, he was built good. So I called the stalker owner up. I said, Justin, I want that calf. Well, why would you want him? He's the worst one in there. He said, he's got big old long ears. I said, you'll never get your money back. I'm like, I want him. So he sold him to me for $400. I named him Ears. And Ears grew and grew, and he got to be this most beautiful steer. And so when we got steers in, we get Ears and turn them young steers in with Ears. He'd take him to water, he'd take him to the next pasture, he'd take him to the corral. If we wanted to load, we got Ears, and they would follow that big steer wherever he went. And I got that from Gordon Hazard.
And I heard you say that before. I think that's really, really smart.
Yeah.
Because honestly, the way that's set up right now where we're contract grazing, you could do that. We just bring it back to our place in the winter, and
Yep.
we hit grass again, we can go back and bring them. But I've had a couple of steers in my past that I wish I would have held on to just for that reason.
Yeah. A good tame steer that is very docile, and he never gets upset. You open the gate, he's right there and moves. Boy, on day one, you can move those new steers to fresh grass. That's worth a lot of money.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
How long would you say, what's your training process to hot wire when you were training an animal?
Well, I used a lot of ribbon. I used the 1/2-inch poly tape, and I would tie beer cans or soda cans on it, or pie plates, aluminum pie plates. And it would go around my training area. So my training area was about probably an acre, but it was tight. It was woven wire, 2 barbs on top, and my offset hot wires on the inside. And usually within 2 days, I had them trained.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and I put the water tank right underneath that hot wire. So when they go up to drink, they sniff, and there's the pipe hand right there with the wet nose. You hit them 8,000 volts a couple of times, they get broke pretty quick.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. They got to realize what's shocking them. You know, pretty soon they see that white thing, like, I'm not going through that anymore.
Right. Whenever you hear that,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
like, yep, we just made progress there.
Yeah, that one just got the treatment.
And they don't test it as much as pigs. Pigs will test them daily for a couple weeks, but then they get used to it too, and they get well trained. You guys ran pigs at one point, right?
We did. Yeah.
What made you get out of that?
We had another family here that was doing it, and they moved on, and might as well tell you point blank, people want you to feed non-GMO grain to them, or some people want organic, certified organic grain fed to them. They're not willing to pay for what that pig's worth.
Yeah.
We were getting $1,100 for a pig, and we'd have people say, well, I can go to the sale barn and buy one for $250. Why would I give you $1,100 for yours? Well, the one at the sale barn was fed GMO corn. It was raised in confinement. It never saw sunlight. Ours is out here moving, eating acorns and hickory nuts and grubs, and being moved on woods every couple of days. Acorns in the fall, but the meat was just superior.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't make that connection. They're not willing to pay the money for the good food. And so if you can't make money doing something, why are you doing it?
Yeah.
That's my answer to pigs.
Yeah.
They're an omnivore, they're not a herbivore.
Right.
You can't fatten a pig out there on that grass. Now, if you got a lot of clover in there, he can kind of make a living on that, but he's not going to get pig fat. They got to have a little grain.
Especially now with people, I feel like for whatever reason, when people first get into this world, they have this urge to go towards pigs.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. I kind of had it too. But
We used to raise pigs down on a creek. There was a creek bank down there, a big long one that's in the woods, and they were happy down there. We didn't let them in the creek. And they did good down there, but we always ended up with a pretty good feed bill in them. And for the feed we had them and your labor.
yeah, they're more work.
Their work, the darn things, if you don't keep them moving, they will destroy your land.
Yeah.
That's what they do.
Yeah. And you have no backup plan. So if you get 20 of them in the summer and there's no selling them at the sales barn.
No, you can't.
No,
nobody buys them.
No, that's what I mean. Again, cattle are pretty incredible.
Yeah.
So you transition out of the contract grazing, you save up some money. Responsible. That's, I think, really sound advice.
Yep.
What were you looking for when you knew? I mean, you had not to mention then you had tons of experience to see the animals, see how they perform. How much information did you get from the contract grazing to then deciding what type of animal and what type of...
you talk about a wake-up call.
Yeah.
My gosh, I didn't realize how pampered the nation's cow herd is. I mean, these guys they were making me feed breeder cubes to cows in the summertime on grass to get them to breed. Great, and we ran the big cows. I mean, you go to the sale barn today and you hear the auction, there's a great big old black cow. Come on, boys, bid her up now, and scales are pushing 1,600 pounds. You couldn't give me that cow. Well, you could, I'd butcher her, but I don't want a 1,600 pound cow out here on my grass.
Yeah.
And so we ran the big cows, and we had to pamper them to get them to breed. And a lot of times they didn't breed. We had pampered bulls. You had to feed the bulls grain, get them nice and big and fat, and then they just melt. They just melt on pasture breeding cows. I'm like, there's got to be a cow out here that can make it on grass. And so I was very fortunate. You know, I wrote that first book, No Risk Ranching, and I got put on the speaking circuit with the Stockman grass farmer. And I was speaking in Dallas with an old guy named Gerald Fry. And Gerald, his whole talk was on grass genetic cattle. I'm like, what are you talking about, grass genetic? Cow's a cow, right? No, not true at all. Some cows, because of the way they're built, they're just a whole lot more efficient than other cows. And so he took me under his wing, and I was a pretty darn good student. I knew what he was saying was correct, because I was grazing these great big old cows that couldn't make a living. And then he introduced me to the South Pole, and I'm like, wait a minute, where's the grain bucket? Why aren't you got to be feeding them cows. Look how fat and slick they are. Where's the grain feeders at? Greg, he doesn't feed them. I'm like, well, I've never seen a cow that fat on grass. And so we bought 20 of them, I'm sorry, 22, brought them home, put them in with we'd started another herd of Red Angus, commodity. And they just got through calving. They look like, their first calf heifers, it looked like they come out of a POW camp. I'm serious, you count every bone on them. They just started melting. They couldn't put any weight on after calving. And they'd follow you around, just bawl, looking for some grain. I sold every one of them and kept those South Poles. And yeah, there are cattle out there that can make a good living on grass. You got to find them though. And I really believe it comes down to efficiency of grass. You are in the grass business, so you need to maximize your return on that grass blade.
Unlock the secrets of Acres USA. Transform your land and legacy with an exclusive Acres Eco Farmer membership. Take some of our most famous speakers from previous conferences with you in the tractor. Speakers like John Kemp, Gary Zimmer, Andre Liu, Paul Dorrance, Gabe Brown, Joel Salatin, Fred Provenza, Dr. Paul Detloff, Charles Walters, Mark Shepard, Jerry Brunetti, Neil Kinsey, Jeff Moyer, Nasha Winters, Arden Anderson, Doug Vine, Elaine Ingham, Dr. Don Huber, and many, many more. As part of this membership, you'll get 12 issues per year of our magazine with exclusive access to our new magazine membership site, with content that doesn't even make it to the magazine. It'll be 50 plus years of recordings delivered to you in audio drops, and 50 plus years of archival material, along with discounts to our bookstore and discounts to our events. Please check out eco-farming.com for more information on our membership.
How's the best way to do that? Well, you can do grass-fed beef, or you can do seed stock. And Gerald Fry told me, he said, Greg, you treat those cows, put some pressure on them. What he meant by that is don't wean the calves. I'm like, what do you mean? Don't wean the calf. You got to wean the calf in the fall, the cow will die. That calf will suck that cow where she's just thin in the winter, she'll die. No, he said, some of them will. But he said, there's some cows that can do it. And so that's what we did. We started putting pressure on the cows. And some of them couldn't do it. We got rid of those. And so by not weaning, we made that cow work through the wintertime, giving that calf just a cup of milk, probably twice a day. And we call that wintering the cow on the fat of the tailhead. So you got a big fat tailhead in the fall. All them wrinkles in there from all the fat. Well, by March, she doesn't have a fat tailhead anymore. She's used that energy in that fat to feed that calf. And but Gerald says, you paid money, good money for that cow. Why aren't you making her work for you in the wintertime? I'm like, well, she's building me a calf inside her and not working. Nah, she's on vacation. He said, you need to make her work. And so.
You notice the difference with how fast they grow when they're still sucking too.
Yeah, darn right. And our calves come to the winter butterball fat. We don't feed them an ounce of grain. And now we got this nice 450 to 550 pound calf. When that spring grass hits, boom, you got something to eat grass, put weight on.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and think about it, this year right now, I mean, that's $1,500 to $1,800 if you were to go unload them right now this spring.
Yep, that's right.
For an animal that, what's your cost of production on those mamas during a year? One bale a year,
yeah,
maybe?
Yeah, well, our target is, we try and hit half a bale.
Half a bale?
For the whole winter. Last winter, because of the drought, we were at about 1.33 bales for the whole winter per
Yeah.
cow.
Yeah, and I said what I say earlier, 7.
Yeah.
I think was our target. We've been between 6 and 8 bales a winter. So when I talk to a bunch of local people, and then I go back to your videos, I'm always in between these two. Well, you have to feed hay here. So in my position, where we're up in Wisconsin, most people, I think I'm probably, I bet most people are averaging 15 bales a winter, at least.
Yeah, 15 bales. Oh my.
I would say majority where I'm at, majority of people are feeding hay by October 15th. Then I would say most people aren't on grass until probably June 1st is the, safe bet.
Yeah.
So have you seen people that far north, and what are they doing? I know some people do cover crops. Part of me with the hay too is it's like a security thing.
Yep.
Like I get to see them, they're eating that. Like for some reason, sometimes I think like I have to just trust the fact they're going to get something out of that grass, even when it looks like they won't.
Right. Well, do you all have fescue up there where you're at?
Yeah.
Pretty
not like as natural as you do, but yeah, we put some in our seeding.
Yeah.
And you can tell, like, they will be picky about that all growing season, but then throughout the whole winter,
They love it.
they eat it. Yeah, love it.
The thing I warn people about is if you're in, the western Kansas where they have a lot of warm season grasses, or even up north where you have a lot of brome does not stockpile worth a darn.
Yeah.
It's almost like feeding them straw, and they'll eat it, but they'll starve to death eating it. And you need to give them some kind of protein supplement, which is very expensive. So everybody asks me, well, Greg, if you're going to start over again, where would you start your grazing operation at? I'm like, someplace that grows fescue. Because that's our unfair advantage here in the Midwest is fescue will take a cow through the winter. Oh yeah, it's got the endophyte in it. But we've learned to manage for that. And it'll stay green. And those cows just absolutely do cartwheels on it all winter long, feeding themselves. You're not after unrolling a bale for them. And, at $120 to $130 a bale last winter, there's people around here, it was the first time in 40 years, an ag lender said, Greg, they're selling their cow herds. They are. They're selling their cow herds. They can't make any money now.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's a travesty. Because they got their own cattle and they're not managing their grass. Most people don't manage their grass.
Yeah. So how do you describe managing your grass so that you have that stockpile?
Managing grass, it starts in the springtime. Everybody says, oh, your stockpile. You're going to stockpile that grass, and that starts August 1st. So you're talking about Missouri here. You go in July, you clip it. This is what the conventional teaching is. You clip your pastures in July, you put down 100 pounds of nitrogen per acre, and that'll grow you your winter stockpile. Well, what if it doesn't rain?
And burned your grass up?
You burnt your grass up. You just spent a ton of money on nitrogen fertilizer. You're not getting that back. And you mowed your grass off, and it doesn't rain. It's a really good way to go broke. But these people sitting behind the desk at some of these universities, they don't have a clue because they've never had an animal. But they're telling us how to farm. So what we do is in the springtime, we're focused on taking that top part of these plants and getting moving them. And by taking the top part of the plant off, it comes back more vegetative, and it gets thicker. It gets thicker as the season progresses. And the other thing we're doing is we're leaving off part of our farms. We don't graze them all. So this grass will grow up real tall and thick in the spring. We can't get around it anyway. So we let that go. We come back into July. And the areas we do that to, we call it giving it a sabbatical. Give that farm a sabbatical. Just let it rest. Well, if you've got grass that tall, what do you think the roots look like? They're fully recovered. They're just cranking. And when you go in and put cows on it and trample some of that, the earthworm population just absolutely explodes because you fed them. They're there. They're eating that stuff. And, an earthworm casting is a pH of 7. So there's no lime, there's no fertilizer. It's the cow and the forage. That's where the money's at. It's not in all this fancy equipment. I think too many people getting in today are all focused on this equipment. And I just saw a guy, he's going broke. There's a YouTube video, and I looked down his farm, like, I can see why you went broke. He had like 4 tractors, he had a swather, he had a brand new baler, he had this big barn he's storing all the bales in. I'm like, those cattle didn't ask him to buy any of that. He thought that's what he needed to go into the cattle business. Most people are machine heavy and cattle light.
Yeah.
Too many machinery, not enough cattle. That's what puts people under.
I don't even know how it would work. Ever pencil out.
Well, it
that
doesn't.
way.
It doesn't.
I came onto that cafeteria style feeder with mineral. I'm a big fan of it. But then it took me out of from being able to do everything by hand to actually having to pull that thing around a little bit.
Well, it's heavy.
Yeah. Yeah, there's not, I mean, we move it, we can kind of drag it around if we really need to.
Well, you're a big stout guy. I can't move it.
I'm not, I don't need that big of a workout all the time. But yeah, we had it down to just by hand, and
Yep.
you know, I had done the same thing the first year I bought a farm, get a Kubota tractor, and of course it was too small, so I can barely even handle a hay bale.
Yeah.
So it really was pointless.
Yeah.
But I think that's what your bale and roller allows people to do too, is you could really just have a 4-wheeler and...
We're feeding 350 head all winter long with a 750-pound 4-wheeler.
Yeah.
And that's with 3 guys on it. My 3 interns ride on that thing with the bale. And now you don't want to try and climb a hill like that with it, but you got to be smart about it. You put your hay up on the top, the high parts of your farm, so in the wintertime you hook onto it, you can use gravity, you know, to get that hay out there. So all of our hay is already put where we need it before winter ever gets there. And we store it up on poles. Most people don't do this, but when you buy your hay, put it up on a 6 to 8 inch oak post, one on each side, and that bale won't be touching the ground. It'll last 2 years, and it won't be rotted when you feed it. If you lay a bale on the ground, let's say you bought your hay in July, by the time you feed it in January, well, we don't start feeding hay some years until February, but the time you feed that bale, that bottom, it's rotted.
Yeah.
Well, why'd you do that? You spent all that money, you laid it on the ground, the rain hits it, and it does this. The rain hits that bale, it follows that netting around, and it pools up right on the bottom of the bale. Rotted, gone. It's no feed value at all.
Yeah.
So,
I find it interesting that you talk about, you know, you give an area sabbatical, where I think most people would say that area's gone too far, and then once you turn cattle in there, what are they eating? They're eating seed heads and right. But I don't think people realize how much, and I'm not sure I completely have tested this either, where we've given cattle that much rest. So you feel confident in the fact that if you get into, say, August, that there's enough regrowth underneath that old seed heads and
yeah. Folks, what you're trying to do is use the cattle's feet. See, when you this is a grass blade. When you trample that thing in the springtime, it does this. It just pops right back up. But now when you get it up there a couple feet tall and cattle step on it, it stays down.
Right.
And so now you've broken that stem over, and the sap flow to the roots is no longer going through that stem. Guess what you just did? You fed a whole bunch of earthworms.
Laid down a bunch of straw.
That's right.
Hi there, just wanted to interrupt this episode to make sure that you have heard about our Acres 2024 Eco-Ag Conference. This year's event will be held in Madison, Wisconsin from December 2nd through December 5th. I think we have put together one of the best lineups for a conference in the regenerative and organic agriculture space. Gabe Brown, Alan Williams, and their team from Understanding Ag are leading our keynote list. John Kemp, Gary Zimmer, Jay Fuhrer, Mark Shepard, Megan Neubauer, Nasha Winters, and Dan Kittredge will also be there with more announcements on speakers to come. So if you're interested, feel free to give us a call at 970-392-4464 or email us at support@acresusa.com. You can also register online at acresusa.com/eco-ag.
Yep.
So I think probably one of the last things to talk about is what is the process you have for calling in kind of selecting your herd? What are the signs that, you know, either a heifer or moms will show that?
That's it right here. So I have a day timer, so there's one for every month of the year. And on the first page, this is where I record my call animals for the month, right here. I do. I write their name down, and if their name goes on there, they're gone.
Yeah.
So any animal that develops a limp for whatever reason, maybe she's given me a calf that's not doing well, she's not milking, whatever, I just get rid of them. A cow that has a bad udder, she doesn't shed off. If a cow doesn't shed off in the heat, get rid of her. All they are is a fly magnet. Mm-hmm. Those cows bring flies to them. A cow that doesn't shed off is putting out an odor to nature and it's saying, kill me. That's what it's telling them. And the flies are more than happy to do that. They're coming and they're trying to kill that cow. Well, with all those flies attacking that one cow, they're going in your manure. All she's doing is perpetuating your fly issue. Get rid of her. She's not going to make you any money. If they don't shed off, you got to get rid of that cow. She's probably got worms. If she does, we don't worm. We've never wormed, and I'm not going to start. So a cow that has a runny tail, a real runny tail, and all the rest of them are clean, she's got parasites.
Yeah.
Get rid of her. Those are some things that we call for. Yeah.
And then bulls and steers?
So bulls, we leave the bulls, the bull calves are left on the cow until March 1st. So they're born in April, May. They go through the winter on the cow, and in March 1st, we go in and we castrate. So they're 10 to 11 months old. If it was an April-born calf, he would be 11. If it was a May-born calf, he'd be 10 months old. So what we do is we use the testicles it's a weight-gaining mechanism. I got this from Ian from Africa. He's like, Greg, you all in the United States, he said, you all just like stress in your life. I'm like, no, we really don't. He said, then why are you fighting nature all the time? I'm like, what are you talking about? Well, he said, you threw that baby calf down the ground, he was half a day old, and you cut his testicles out. And he said 120 days later, everybody's putting these dang growth implants in their ear to make them put weight on. He said, God gave him testicles. That's a weight-gaining mechanism. Use it. I'm like, well, won't the meat be tough? No, he said, heck no, it won't be tough. He said, leave the nuts on them. And that's what we do. So a bull that's 10 to 11 months old, a bull calf, you can kind of tell at that age if he's going to be something that you want to sell as a breeding bull or he needs to have his nuts taken off.
Yeah.
And we use a cow crate bander. We use a 5cc tetanus shot when we band them, and I've never lost one. And the nuts will fall off in about 3 to 4 weeks. They just dry up and fall off.
So what are the signs that you're seeing if you want a breeding bull?
So a good breeding bull, everybody has a wrong idea, I think, what breeding bulls should look like. Not everybody, but a lot of people do. I was growing up, my dad, you got to have a big bone on your bull. A big bone on the leg and a big old bone on the tail, and I'm like, and a big ass. And I'm like, really? Yeah, you want a big ass on your bull. No, you don't. You want a big ass on your females, the cows. Why do you want a big butt on your cow? That's where the calf's coming out. You got a little skinny butted cow, you're gonna have trouble calving. A bull is manly, chest, testosterone, the crest on the neck. They should be manly looking. If they look like a cow through the neck and the head, that's going to be a wimpy bull. You don't want to be promoting that. Mm-hmm. He needs to be a steer. The sheaf hanging down on the belly. You don't want a big, long, hairy sheaf hanging down on your bull. All that's going to do is collect trash and cockleburs and such, and he's going to get infection down there. And also, it's going to give you bad udders on his females. So his daughters are going to have a nasty-looking udder, a lot of hair on it, tilted. They'll have tilted udders. The testicles should look like buckskin. I'm talking buckskin, no hair on the testicles, absolutely not. And they should be evenly matched. You know, you don't want one nut hanging down lower than the other nut. And no teats. You can't have a teat on the testicle of your bull. The teats need to be up on the belly. You don't want a teat sticking off a testicle. That's an inferior trait.
What are the traits you're looking for in heifers? What you said? You had mentioned
feminine.
You had mentioned their.
Yeah, so I want good girth between their front legs, but the butt. You got to have a nice butt. If you got a little pinch butt on your females, that's not something you want to keep. As they grow out, they need to have a big gut, because they're going to be, I call them pencil gut. If you got a little pencil gut on your heifer, she ain't got no capacity to hold the grass. Get rid of her. Because when she has a calf, you'll get her bred, but you won't get the second calf. She won't breed back. And that's because she doesn't have enough gut to hold enough grass to raise the calf and get fat and cycle back. Okay? You got to have gut on your cattle, folks. And we've unfortunately bred the gut out of a lot of our cows. And you know why that is? Because we feed them grain. We don't need gut.
They want bigger.
Yeah.
Bigger frames.
I had a guy wrote an article, and I was so mad I had steam coming out of my nose. And I couldn't take it. And I called him up because I know him. I said, "What are you doing?" The title of the article is, "Boys, we got to get them bigger." And I mean, cows are already 1,400, 1,600 pounds. He said, "You got to get them bigger." I said, "Justin, how big we got to get them to suit you?" Well, he said, "The Packers want them about the size of an elephant." He was honest. I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" I said, "The size of an elephant?" "Well, yeah, get them big. You got to get them big." I said, "You're already putting people out of business. You've got them too dang big now." I said, "They can't breed without feeding them a bunch of grain." I said, "They tear our pastures up because they're too big. In wet times, they just stomp the heck." That's why people winter their cattle in a sacrifice area. We don't have a sacrifice area anywhere on our farms, nowhere. Our cattle are wintered outside. We move them. We keep them moving. Even on wet pastures, it can rain for 11 days in a row. I'm going to keep moving my cows. And I can do that because our cows weigh 900 to 1,000 pounds.
Yeah.
But you got to use the right bowl to get your cow size down. If you're using a 2,000 pound bowl, that ain't gonna work.
Short, stocky, fat gut.
The bone, I'll stop here. Look at the bone on your animals. This is good for cows and bulls both. From right here on their hoof up to this elbow right here, this area right here, it should be very fine and dense like a deer. Very fine boned animals. Those are the ones that make you some money. If you got great big bone on your animals, all you told me is you got high maintenance cows. Mm-hmm. You ain't gonna make any money with them. They're gonna eat too much. And remember, you can't eat the bone.
Yeah.
You can boil it and get you some soup bone, but you can't eat it.
So how do you... That's really good. So what's your advice to younger folk, or even anyone? Well, what's your advice to the guy that is taking advice from more conventional folks? You know, how do you talk people? I'm not, because you can't really talk people into it. They kind of gotta know that whatever they're doing isn't necessarily working. But what is something you say to folks that, I mean, I'm sure you've seen a lot of people with their light bulbs go off in their head. Like, what do you see as, a good message to send?
I get testimonials every day through this, on my YouTube channel. We have a lot of people that hit that, and I guess that's why I do it. I've changed a lot of people's lives. People now are doing things better. Their farms are better. They're making a profit. They've been able to quit their jobs. There's a future there for their kids. And some of those people were conventional. And I tell you what makes people change is when they finally decide that they've gotten beat up enough that they either have to change or quit. I'm serious, and a lot of it's right here. And Ian says it's in the heart. It's in your heart. If you're not humble, you're not going to make it. Because you're too damn proud to say, you know what I've been doing is wrong, and I've got to change. If you're not willing to have that humility and say, Daddy did it this way, my grandfather did it this way, and you don't know what you're talking about. Well, fine, go on down the road. I've got a guy right up the road here. He's been watching me for 35 years. He's never changed. Sold all his cows. Told the neighbors there's no money in livestock. But he never moves his cows. I mean, he lets them in the pond. It's a wreck. His pastures look like a putting green. there's no money in cattle. But that man's got a hard heart. He's not going to change.
Yeah.
So you can't change. People have to be ready to change. And what's really, our grazing schools, we have grazing schools here every year in May. Ian and I do one advanced and I do a beginner school. And every year there's people that go home, it looks like they're on steroids, they're just on jumping jacks. They're so excited to get home and try and put into implementation some of the stuff that we teach. And I'm excited about that, you know. And so
Where'd you get the motivation to teach? You wrote a book early on before you'd even had your own herd. So it's almost like you've always been documenting and talking about.
I have. I guess it came from my bloodline. Maybe, I don't know. My Uncle Scott was a teacher. He had a yearning to teach, and he taught agriculture in Africa. And he would come back and teach us kids what he was teaching them. And it was always intrigued me that he was always trying to teach people to do to do better, you know, farm better. And I think I got some of it from my Uncle Scott. He was a bachelor, never married, went around the world twice, lived in about every country in the world, and taught ag. That's what he did. Yeah.
Well, I think your YouTube channel, the first year I was grazing, completely lost, confused, no idea what I'm doing. But the fact that I could flip on YouTube and get a perspective of you going through that timing in the season was super beneficial to me. And it'd be like, well, what is going on with my cattle right now? Like, it's fly season, and then you flip YouTube on and you're talking about flies a week later.
Yeah.
Especially with you being in Missouri, you're always kind of ahead of where we are.
Right.
But I think what you've done to the channel is super unique. I think you've changed tons of people's lives, and obviously it's incredible the amount of reach that you have with that.
Well, you know, to give you an idea, I just booked a we're going to Northern Ireland this year, and it's the first regenerative grazing conference held in Northern Ireland. And they asked me to be the keynote speaker, and I felt kind of privileged to do that. And so they want me to go around Ireland after this workshop. It's called the Feels Good Conference. And they're lining me up with grazers around Ireland to visit. And just sit there and have a conversation like we are right now.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to Nova Scotia in September, and New Brunswick, Newfoundland, and Prince Edward Island. So Canada wants me to come up and do those provinces, grazing workshops there. Last year we were in Alberta. It's amazing. I mean,
the concept travels.
It does.
It doesn't work here crowd.
There's always going to be some of those.
Yeah.
I've met some of them in Alberta last year. I had a guy tell me he had 2,200 pound cows. He said, Greg, my cow doesn't eat any more than your 1,000 pound cow. Like, you're right. You don't argue. You don't argue. You just say, you're right. You're right.
Your feet don't go into the ground further either.
Yeah. But anyway.
So what would you recommend for us in Wisconsin? Would you still go South Pole, or would you try to breed a little bit of Angus in them to give them a little bit?
You got to have hair.
Yeah.
You have to have hair up there. I've got a guy in Minnesota, George Heller. He's up there by Branson.
Yep. Brainerd.
Brainerd,
I think.
He's got South Poles. He's had them now, 5 years. He just sold the first South Pole bull into Canada.
Pure?
Yep.
But he keeps hair.
Yes.
Where
you've got to know. So I sold George South Poles that I knew would grow hair.
Yeah.
You've got to know your breeder, because there's what they call a slick hide gene. Those bulls and those cows will not grow winter hair, and they would die in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
But you get a South Pole that will grow hair, they do fine in Wisconsin. I really believe that.
Know your breeder. Well,
yeah,
nice to meet you.
Yeah. I just made a sale. No, you got to know your breeder. I've got cattle in Michigan. I think there's a few in Wisconsin. Not very many. Most of them are either Michigan, Minnesota. Heck, they're in Montana, Utah. Utah has some pretty bad winters out there.
Yeah. Well, Montana would too.
Yeah, Montana. So you got to know your breeder. Yeah.
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 All right, Greg. Point people, or best place for them to reach you is YouTube.
Yeah, Greg Judy, Regenerative Rancher, is on a YouTube channel, and then our Facebook page, or our website is greenpasturesfarm.net.
Okay.
Yep.
And then grazing school are done for the year, but if you get a chance, come on out to
Yep.
a grazing school next
Yep.
spring.
Yep. Sign up for our newsletter on our website, and you'll see when we put up cattle for sale, sheep for sale, guard dogs. When I'm speaking, it's all on there.
Do you see? Well, sorry to cut you off, but do you see that kind of being the future, an opportunity for folks where, you know, maybe we're getting out of the sales barn and a lot of these things are happening online? And because that's the biggest issue I've had is where do you find grass-fed people even selling animals?
Well, you can't. I mean, you're not going to find them at the sale barn.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, I'd say get a website. Let's talk marketing just a little bit here. You've got to get a website. You've got to have some social media presence, and you got to be consistent. And you got to be honest, and you got to stand behind your animals. Don't sell junk.
Yeah.
Just don't sell anybody something that you wouldn't keep in your herd, you know. And this year we had our bull sale. It was Saturday. We had 4 repeat customers. So those are people that bought bulls and like, man, we love these calves, and they came back and they bought another bull, you know. And that's what you're wanting. You don't want a one and done sale. You want repeat customers. If you got repeat customers, you're doing something right.
Yeah.
Yep. So.
Well, you are a marketing wizard in that sense. I think your consistency on YouTube is, we need to take lessons from that. It is a game, isn't it?
You've got to stay after it.
Have you noticed if you take a few days off,
well, you just got to watch it. I mean, I'm very active on my YouTube channel because there's so many trolls out there. You got to get those off of there. Some people have nasty remarks. Folks, I've got little kids watching. I've got kids sucking on a bottle after dinner. I got a guy sent me a picture the other day, and there's this little 2-year-old boy in a recliner with a bottle in his mouth. And he says, Daddy, it's Greg Judy time.
That's what my wife said this morning.
It's
She said, Woods, Dad's going to go see Greg Judy instead of watching him on TV.
It's Greg Judy time.
Can I go see the cows?
Yeah, I'm active on there. I don't want people leaving nasty remarks and having young kids exposed. If you cuss on my channel, you're done.
Yeah.
I'll block you. You're not coming back. Be honest with people. You know, I didn't think we'd ever get up to 122,000 subscribers, but we're about 3.6 million minutes now a month. That's a lot of people. You know, that's a lot of time people are watching that channel. And so do I need 3.6 million customers? No. But, you know, if you're honest with people and show them what you're doing, people that come to our farm and they've met us and they come to the school and say, you know what, this isn't bullcrap. You're genuine. What you say is what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I never have ever edited a video, ever. I don't edit. I don't put music on there either. People are busy. They don't have time to listen to all that crap. Go to the message. Just go to the message. Be done with it.
Do you prepare it all for those videos? Do you think of like, here's something I'm going to talk about, or does it just hit you when you hit the
I've got a list. I keep a list in here. When I'm out on the farm, I'll see something like, got to do a video on that.
Yeah.
You can't remember it. You got to write it down. And my YouTube subscribers are really good. They'll ask
They start giving you the feedback.
Yep. And Jan's good because she'll write them down.
Yeah.
And then we'll answer those questions on a separate video. And those are real popular.
Well.
Yeah.
Well, I know you know it because everyone gives you the feedback, but you've helped a lot of people. You've helped me. I appreciate everything that you've done, and I don't know if I'd still be grazing if it wasn't for you, but I also you probably kind of got me into it too. So.
For good or bad.
All right, Greg.
Nice to meet you, sir.
Thank you for listening to the Acres USA podcast, a podcast production of Acres USA. Find us on Spotify, Apple, Google Play, and other popular podcast platforms. Acres USA is North America's oldest publisher on production-scale organic and regenerative farming. For more than 50 years, our mission has been to help farmers, ranchers, and market gardeners grow food profitably, regeneratively, and with nature in mind. Find our books and other Acres USA media and learn about Acres USA events at acresusa.com. Read our online magazine at members.acresusa.com and we'd like to thank Acres USA staff for their contributions to producing this podcast. This episode was edited and engineered by Kennedy Stroessel and Weston Larson of Acres USA. And we're grateful to our guests for taking the time to talk with us about their experience.